everybody. Welcome back to my sleep mechanics talks and game guides. Now, in this video, I wanted to touch on something that I've had on my mind for a while and I've seen talked about quite a bit in the community. And I just wanted to actually, voice my thoughts on this matter because a lot of people pretty much unanimously agree with this idea, but I agree with it, but I think the community overhypes it a little bit too much. And I've alluded to it before in a couple of my other videos, primarily the power of the bag video and the sneaky snacking video. But it really just comes down to this idea that berry specialists are better if they have less ingredient finding. Now, that is true. I will not argue that point. In most cases, a berry specialist is going to be stronger if it's just finding berries. However, I will argue that it doesn't really matter, and there are a few reasons for that. First, and this isn't really, I'm not going to quantify this because it's been done time and time again. If you really want to know a little bit about this and the math behind it, go to my Power of the Bag video, and it can really show off this concept a little bit better. But basically, yes, ingredients at their base value are less valuable than the berries that berry specialists produce, usually. However, if you're using them as part of a meal and planning your meals accordingly to what your berry specialists are producing, then in that case, the ingredients are actually stronger than the berries 9 times out of 10. You just need to be smart in planning accordingly. But what about if we aren't using them in a meal? And that's kind of what I want to dive into this today. So remember, you can always use the ingredients in a meal and then all this math goes out the window. But I want to show just why I think that ingredient finding subskills in nature on a berry specialist isn't as bad as people make it out to be. I've oftentimes seen people try to make grading systems, and they'll say ingredient finding, if they're making an easy grading system, they'll put help speed S as a +1 and ingredient finding M as or ingredient finding S as a -1 and help speed M as a +2 and ingredient finding M as a -2 for their quick grading. That is not good math. They are not valued the same, and in my opinion, ingredient finding on a berry specialist isn't as bad as people make it out to be, and I'm going to show why with a spreadsheet that I've assembled today. Now, this spreadsheet, I'm going to show it off here. This spreadsheet is one that I put together a while ago. I was doing some other sort of research having to do with dual berry specialists. I made a Reddit post about it. I never ever posted a thing on YouTube about this one because it was before my YouTube days. But I'll leave a link to that Reddit thread if you're interested what this spreadsheet is and how it works. Basically, I've input every Pokemon in the game. In this one, I cut out all the non-berry specialists because I wanted to just include the berry specialists for the sample size because it'd be unfair otherwise. And it calculates, basically, right here, average daily output. So this daily output value is the value that Pokemon, and basically the idea of this is to make a cross comparison to every other Pokemon in the game to evaluate them as a species against the other species. So that's really what this does. Using, if you check off favored berries, if you're looking at a specific island, which you can see how long it's been because I haven't actually included Old Gold Power Plant on this yet because, like I said, it was before my YouTube days. It was before Old Gold Power Plant was a thing. So I still haven't updated to add that. I did update for Weavile, though, for this specific study. And yeah, so I just wanted to see how does it really all play in. And basically, I calculate the average value of a help by including the proc of a berry help, proc of an ingredient help, their ingredient rate, and I use all that stuff to math it out to figure out what their expected daily output is based off of that. If you want to see the spreadsheet, I'll also link it in the description, but it's a lot of numbers, as you can see here. Basically, I used all of this, and I averaged across every type of berry specialist for every ingredient list, because different ingredient lists have different values, even within the same species, so it's going to evaluate differently, to then take account for every single ingredient berry specialist And then I just averaged their value, their daily output value right here. So the spreadsheet does a lot more, and I could talk about that some other time someday, but maybe I'll make a future video on that. But this is the average expected daily output value of just any ingredient specialist should they be acting at minimum energy and they are like no further benefits apply. There's no helping bonus on the team, things like that. You actually can account for that stuff, but I didn't use any of that because that'll increase berries and ingredients the same. So these numbers should all come out the same because this is just comparing ingredient finding or no ingredient finding as a base. Now, and I'm not accounting for inventory or skills at all in this analysis. This is just raw berry and ingredient output, assuming you're not using any meal bonus. Now, looking here, I made a comparison, and I just basically went through and put all the berry finders in and compared them at different levels, depending on very different conditions. This one is my average output. And then I just took this and pasted in whatever this box read for whatever settings I had it set to, and then made comparisons to figure out what percentage of your daily output you're losing based off of having ingredient finder on the berry specialist. And the results that I found, you'll see here, numerically do not equal what a lot of people would imply how ingredient finder hurts berry specialists. So, to start, I'm going to talk about the ideal. That's what I think this really is, or these three are kind of what I think we're looking at for the ideal. First thing first, ingredient finding up nature. This is assuming we have favored berry and berry finding S, which I think is like the best circumstance for a berry specialist to not want ingredient finding, because that means the berries are much stronger. So losing a berry proc is going to be more harmful to an ingredient proc when the ingredient proc's raw value is going to remain the same no matter what the island you're on is. So this is really the best circumstance for it. And as you can see, I included levels 10, 25, 29, and 39. I'll get to what. Basically, I included big breakpoints. I didn't include level 75 because it doesn't really make a difference on this analysis. But I also include level 59 and 29 because at level 29 is when it also, and 59 is when it theoretically should be best for berry specialists aside from the late levels. So, that's why I included them, because at the next level, they get more valuable ingredient procs at level 30 and level 60 respectively. So I wanted to include them for the ideas of this thing. And as you can see here, with a neutral nature comparing to an ingredient finding nature, the percent daily value lost with having the ingredient finding up nature is, even at level 100 where it's best for them, is less than 5%. So you want to know what great subskill the Pokemon doesn't even need to have that boosts your team by more than 5% and completely counteracts this bad nature? Health bonus. Just have one health bonus Pokemon on the team, and you've completely negated the average value lost by your Pokemon having ingredient finding up in the nature. In fact, more so then, because it's a 5.2% bonus to team productivity, possibly more if you have more help speed modifiers. So the nature itself isn't really that bad. It's way less impactful than a speed of health down nature, which is a minus 9.1%. So seeing that it's less than half as impactful as that, even at its maximum. And as you can see, it's mostly like 3% tops across most of these numbers across the Pokemon's life until like the way late game that isn't even out yet. And this is anything that's beyond level 60 is assuming the same curves as what we currently have for berry strength and for Pokemon frequency. That matters. Then, if we look into if they just have ingredient finding M, now I didn't include level 10 because it's not possible for the Pokemon to have ingredient finding M and berry finding S at level 10 because you only have one subskill unlocked. But then, as we go on, yes, ingredient finding M's a little bit stronger than nature on its own. So having that does make these numbers a little bit more drastic. It increases the difference a little bit more, but as you can see, most of them are still below that 5.2% threshold that can be counteracted by just a single helping bonus Pokemon being on the team. Until you get to, once again, the way late numbers that aren't even released in the game yet. Or I guess right at some of the breakpoints, like 50 to 59, you're below that threshold. Right at 29, you're below that. So it's closer to like the value of a help bonus to counteract it. And then down here I have with whatever the max ingredient finding potential is for that level. So at level 10, that'd be just ingredient finding nature. At level 25, that'd be ingredient finding nature plus ingredient finding M. And then level 50, it'd be plus S as well. And as you can see here, the maximum loss from a neutral nature to an ingredient finding up nature, or ingredient finding, all the possible ingredient finding you can have on one Pokemon, is only 18.29%. And that sounds like a lot. That is a lot. Don't get me wrong. That is a significant portion of your Pokemon's productivity. But considering you can negate that by using their ingredients intelligently in the pot, and also by, or running Dedenne. I actually forgot to mention that earlier. Dedenne makes all this math less because this is just assuming regular crit chance. You increase the crit chance, value of ingredients go up. So, like, there's other weird things that go into it that I'm not even plugging into this calculator. But, yeah, level 100, 18.29%. Help Speed M increases your Pokemon's productivity by just over 16%. So, like, that's comparable to a Help Speed M. Be an inverse Help Speed M for this particular Pokemon. That's bad. Help Speed M is good. But if it has all the ingredient finding and it has Help Speed M, you know what? Sure, take it. It gives it more flexibility because maybe you're going to be using those ingredients in the pot. And it's about the same as having Berry Finding S on its own, despite having ingredient finding up in the nature, ingredient finding M, and ingredient finding S. If it doesn't have that Help Speed M sooner, unless you're early game, I wouldn't really recommend investing, but that's a whole different talk of whether you should actually invest in these Pokemon. I'm just trying to make the point that ingredient finding isn't as bad or as great as people make it out to be on Berry Specialists. I also wanted to compare to, oh, I accidentally made the same chart twice. This is the exact same chart. Whoops. Okay. I also wanted to compare neutral nature to ingredients findings down, because people also see this as a nice nature on Berry Specialists. But ultimately, the boost gained in productivity by it, not that impactful as well. Only up to 4.3% boost. Once again, that's less than a helping bonus, and a helping bonus applies to your whole team, not just one Pokemon. So, why people look at this nature and say, oh, that's really good. It's, I guess, a slight boon if you're not using the ingredients, but it's so minuscule compared to so many other bonuses in the game. It really should be an afterthought of, like, that's a nice little boon. It's not like a make or break. Ingredient finding down is a great nature. So I just think that that's a little overhyped. And then just for fun, I compared ingredient finding down to with the max ingredients, and of course it comes out to 21.67% more productivity on the level 100 Pokemon with Favored Berry and Berry Finding S with an ingredient finding down nature compared to with maximum ingredient finding potential. And remember, this is also averages. I do want to disclose that. I should have disclosed that sooner. But this is also averages across species. Certain species will be impacted by this more and less. Pokemon with weaker berry types will be impacted by it less. Pokemon with a lower ingredient rate will be impacted by it less. And Pokemon with the inverse of that, higher value berries and higher ingredient rates will be impacted by it more. So maybe consider that as well. Maybe your Onix doesn't matter as much because it's got a really low ingredient rate. Maybe your Raichu, it doesn't matter as much because it's got a really low value berry. But overall, this is the averages. And this, on average, you're losing about 21% by all that ingredient finding. But once again, this is the maximum possible disparity between ingredient finding down nature and ingredient finding up nature. Assuming you're not putting them in the pot, or in the meal that you're making. Now, over here, I also made the same sort of comparisons if you don't have berry finding S, but you do have favored berry. And as long as you have favored berry alone, it is still always better to not have the ingredient finding. But as I said, the best circumstance is only like a 12.24% difference when you have maximum ingredient finding potential. So even just not having that berry finding S makes the maximum potential less of an impact than help speed M alone. So all of those things combined equal one subskill. And then I also was like, okay, some people run their berry finders on weeks that they don't have favored berry because they find they're strong generalist. How does it perform for the generalist berry specialists? Well, that's what this box is, and I included a few more levels here, particularly 34 and 35, and I'll get to why that is. So, all these points, you can see that they're actually negative numbers here. That's because the ingredients are actually higher value than the berry proc values at those particular levels. So like level 30 and 34, level 10. Now, obviously the berries increase with every single Pokemon level, and the reason why I included 34 and 35 is because that's the break point where every level after that point, ingredient finding is bad. So I just want to keep that in for interest's sake. But if you're running without favored berry or berry finding S, now I would pretty much never recommend this unless you're early game and you only have a few berry finders like that and you're just running them because they're the only things you got. I wouldn't suggest investing any Pokemon like this up unless you have like a boatload of health speed, but that's a different discussion. I wouldn't recommend not running it with favored berry even then. But anyway, there still is a breakpoint where it becomes better, but as you can see throughout most of the Pokemon's life, it is a negative number here. So the ingredients, their raw value actually outperforms the value of the average berry. And it's not until level 66 to 67 that we see the tip point where it starts going in the other direction. So overall, you can see that just unless you're dealing with like the ideal scenario, which is a lot of people's circumstance, a lot of people make sure they only use their berry finders in this circumstance, it still makes a difference, but the difference is so minimal that it shouldn't be like a +1 or a -1 on a scale that gives helping speed M as a +1 or +2. It's not even worth like half the value. An ingredient finding nature isn't even valued at, it's like a quarter of the value of the difference. The nature impacts it by like a quarter of what helping speed M alone impacts it by. So yeah, don't evaluate your berry specialists by worrying about their ingredient finding rate. Overall, the impact of these subskills in nature is just so marginally slim in the grand scheme of things that, sure, at the way late game, it may make a difference. But by the time that we reach there, we'll have invested in these Pokemon up long enough that, like... And when are you going to catch a better one? If you catch something with Berry Finding S help bonus and you see Ingredient Finding M in level 50 and Ingredients Up Nature, that thing is still fantastic. It still has the strongest combination in the game of Berry Finding S and Helping Bonus. All that extra, it could have Ingredient Finding M and Ingredient Finding S in the next 2 slots, and that thing is still good, as long as it doesn't have a speed of Help Down. Even then, I would still maybe consider it. I would run it through the calculators, but I wouldn't say it's immediately bad because of all that ingredient finding, because ingredient finding makes such a minimal impact on a berry specialist productivity that it really is kind of an afterthought. And that's, I guess, my opinion on how the numbers crunch in my mind and how I process it. But it just feels like something that people shouldn't be getting caught up about when they are evaluating their berry specialists. If you know the game a bit deeper and know exactly which berry specialists are the most susceptible to ingredient finding subskills, like the ones that have those high ingredient finding rates, the low ingredient value procs, the high value berries. If you start to dig into that side of it as well, and you figure out which ones are hurt more by it, then maybe you can start looking into it a little bit, because we are working with averages here. But it's just something that I see talked about in the community a lot, and a lot of people tell beginners you don't want ingredient finding on your berry specialist. But in reality, it really doesn't matter that much. Help speed matters far, far more. So that's kind of my rant over. My spreadsheets have shown what I wanted to show. Like I said, I'll leave a link down to that in the description if you want to look at it. You can check it out. But I thank you guys for watching. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.